My name is Mira Dalton, and I'm 30 years old. I live in the city of Brambleton, a bustling hub of art, design, and boutique cafes tucked between mountains and a shimmering river. I work as a creative director for a design firm, and for most of my adult life, I've walked a straight line, disciplined, driven, with goals drawn as cleanly as the logos I helped clients build. But none of that compared to tonight. The room was golden, glowing under soft chandeliers. A string quartet played gently in the corner, the smell of jasmine and rosemary drifting from hand-tied bouquets set on every table. Laughter bounced off polished glassware and polished shoes. Tonight was my engagement party. After nearly 5 years with Jordan, my partner, my friend, and the one person who made life feel more vivid, we were finally taking the leap. 4 months from now, we'd be married. Every detail of the celebration had been carefully curated. Not extravagant, but elegant, intentional. Just like us. Jordan stood beside me in a navy jacket, his arm loosely around my waist, always calm, always present. His laughter still made my shoulders relax, even after all these years. I smiled at him as he leaned in to whisper something about the appetizers being too good to be real. I laughed, brushing my hand across his lapel. Everything felt right. Our friends surrounded us, old college roommates, co-workers, extended family. There were so many faces I loved, people who had watched us grow, witnessed our journey. But as I scanned the crowd, my gaze landed on the one table that didn't quite belong. My parents sat stiffly near the stage, my mother, Yvonne, and my father, Douglas. Her dress was flawless, her posture regal, but there was a tightness in her smile that always made my stomach knot. Beside her, my younger sister Isla slouched in her chair, eyes half-focused on her phone, flicking through images like this event was an inconvenience she had to survive. It wasn't a surprise, Isla had made a habit of skimming through life, burning brightly and crashing often. Still, I kept the tension buried. Tonight wasn't about family dynamics. It was about me and Jordan. About building something new. Or so I believed. At some point during the dinner, a quiet ringing of glass drew the room's attention. My mother had stood up, wine glass in hand, tapping it lightly with a dessert spoon. The quartet faded to a gentle pause. Conversations halted. "I'd like to say something," she began with her ever-smooth voice, the kind that always felt practiced, like a script. There was polite clapping. "To my daughter Mira, and her wonderful fiancé Jordan, congratulations. May your future be filled with all the joy you deserve." More clapping. Jordan squeezed my hand. I smiled, nodding slightly at my mother. It was a rare moment of warmth from her, and it almost felt genuine. But then she set her glass down. "And while we're all here," she continued, her tone sharpening, "I'd like to share a piece of news. After some discussion, Douglas and I have decided that the wedding fund we had allocated for Mira." She paused. I felt something twist in my stomach. "Will be redirected to Isla instead." The room froze. Forks paused midair. Someone near the bar gasped. I blinked, sure I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry?" I asked, my voice brittle. Yvonne smiled again, but this time, it was hollow. Cold. "Isla's wedding is just a few months after yours," she said. "And she needs it more. You have a great job. So does Jordan. You'll be fine." I stared at her, disbelief rushing into my limbs like ice water. "That fund is in my name," I said slowly. "You gave it to me 2 years ago. We've already been planning with it. It's not yours to take back." Isla scoffed loudly and stood, slamming her phone down. "Don't be so dramatic, Mira. You could have offered to share it. I need it more. My fiancé's struggling, and we want a real wedding too, not some backyard barbecue." I rose to my feet, my body trembling with anger and betrayal. "You had a fund," I said, voice tightening. "You spent it. On nonsense. Parties. A failed podcast. A trip to Morocco you didn't even document. Now you want mine? After I worked, saved, planned?" My mother's face went hard. You always make everything about what's fair, Mira. Life isn't fair. Isla has different needs. I made careful decisions, I shot back. I respected the trust you gave me. And now you want to punish me for it. Then it happened. Yvonne stepped toward me, her movements swift and elegant like always, but then her hand cracked across my face with a sharp, resounding slap. My head whipped to the side. The sound echoed off the walls, silencing the room entirely. For a long moment, no one breathed. My cheek burned. My eyes watered, not just from pain, but from sheer disbelief. I turned slowly to face her, my voice shaking but strong. "You don't get to hit me," I said. "Not ever. Not because I said no. Not for anything." The quiet deepened. And then a voice near the bar said quietly, "Someone should call the police." I turned toward it. A server was already on the phone, whispering into the receiver. "Yes, Alden's house on 5th. An assault just occurred. Public setting." Jordan stood beside me, seething but silent, his hand resting gently on my back, grounding me. Within minutes, sirens approached. I watched as my mother tried to spin her version of events to two calm, firm officers. She said it was a family misunderstanding. They reminded her that public assault is a crime regardless of the relationship. When they asked me if I wanted to press charges, I nodded. Yes. They arrested her on the spot. Isla screamed. My father followed them out in dead silence. And me? I stood in that golden room, my face still stinging, surrounded by people who didn't know whether to applaud or disappear. But I knew one thing. This was no longer just about a wedding. It was about reclaiming my voice. And I had only just begun. The morning after the engagement party felt like waking up in someone else's life. I sat at the kitchen counter of our apartment in Brambleton, a cold mug of tea in front of me, Jordan moving quietly around me like a shadow that refused to leave my side. I could still feel the sting of the slap, not on my cheek but in my gut, like a wound that throbbed every time I blinked. My phone buzzed non-stop, texts from friends, a couple from coworkers, a long string of missed calls from relatives who had been there last night but hadn't said a word. Everyone had seen what happened. No one could pretend they hadn't. My mother, Yvonne Dalton, had struck me in front of 70 people. And now? She was facing charges. That morning, I spoke with my lawyer, a sharp, unflinching woman named Dana Keyes, who came recommended by a friend in publishing. She met me at her office with a file already started, having pulled up the public incident report before I arrived. "Simple case," she said after reading the statements. "Public assault, multiple witnesses, police called on site, and a slap heard halfway to the street." I tried to laugh. Failed. Dana leaned forward, voice low and precise. "Mira, this is not just a court date. This is a line in the sand. If we move forward, there's no going back to pretending things are fine with your family." I met her eyes. "We already crossed that line. I'm not walking it back." And so the process began. 3 weeks later, we stood in a courtroom for the first time. It was small, clean wooden benches, pale yellow walls, and a judge who looked like she'd heard every excuse under the sun. Yvonne stood across from me, makeup flawless, lips set in that same tight line of performance she wore at every gala and fundraiser. Douglas sat beside her, silent, blinking as though he hadn't just watched his wife assault their eldest daughter in public. Isla? She wasn't there. Maybe she thought court was beneath her. Or maybe she didn't want to face me. Dana stood at my side, steady and calm. She'd compiled everything, witness testimonies, footage from a security camera in the restaurant, even the call logs and recordings from the server who reported the assault. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood up. "I didn't think I'd ever see my mother this way," I said, my voice clear but trembling. "But I want to make one thing very clear, being my parent doesn't make her untouchable. No one is above the law." The courtroom was silent. The judge took her time. When the verdict came down, it was swift, guilty of misdemeanor assault. A $2,000 fine, 6 months of probation, and court-mandated anger management counseling. She was given a suspended 30-day jail sentence, meaning if she violated the terms, she'd serve time. It wasn't jail. But it was justice. Yvonne never once looked at me. Not during the hearing. Not as we left. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, I came home to find a thick envelope in our mailbox. The return address read, Hollis, Denton, and Ridge, attorneys at law. Inside was a lawsuit. My parents were suing me. They claimed that the $45,000 wedding fund I had received years earlier was never truly mine, that it had only been intended for college, and that I had unlawfully repurposed it. I laughed when I first read it. Laughed, then cried, then screamed into a pillow so hard I gave myself a headache. Because that money. It was mine. Legally. The fund had been set up when I was 17 in a custodial account. When I turned 19, I gained full control. No restrictions, no fine print. And both my parents had told me, on more than one occasion, that it was mine to use for my future however I saw fit. And I had done just that. Used a scholarship to cover most of college, let the fund grow through careful investing, and saved it to help build the life Jordan and I dreamed of. Wedding, then home. Isla had received the same kind of fund. She spent hers in 3 years. First, a high-end arts college she dropped out of. Then a failed web series. Then a pop-up brand with zero planning, one lunch party, and $10,000 wasted on Instagram ads and rented influencers. She bought a luxury car. She hosted a fashion shoot in an abandoned greenhouse. And now, because she'd burned through her fund, my parents were trying to claw back mine. I handed the lawsuit to Dana. She flipped through it, expression unreadable. "They don't have a case," she said finally. "This is desperation. The account was transferred into your name. Any verbal claims of intended use are irrelevant. They're gambling on you folding to pressure. Don't." I nodded. But inside, a storm was already building. The court battle that followed drained me in ways I couldn't predict. Paperwork. Depositions. Discovery motions. Days in court, nights of insomnia. Work became harder. I missed deadlines. Jordan tried to carry more than his share, but even he couldn't shield me from the emotional weight of facing my own family across a courtroom. Each hearing was a parade of absurdity. My parents refused to meet my eyes. Isla finally showed up, smug and dismissive, as though she were the victim. One day, Dana asked her plainly during cross-examination, "Did you use your fund solely for college expenses?" Isla blinked. "Well, not exactly." Dana pounced. "So you dropped out and used the remaining funds on a failed business venture and personal expenses?" Objection. Her lawyer barked. The judge waved it off. "Answer the question." Isla's lips thinned. "I was trying to build something." Dana turned to the judge. "And my client built something too. She just did it responsibly." Every word in that courtroom pulled back the curtain. It wasn't just about the money. It was about favoritism. About a lifetime of watching my sister get coddled while I was expected to keep quiet and carry the load. Now they wanted to punish me for not letting her fail in peace. And still, through it all, Jordan never flinched. He showed up to every hearing. Held my hand when I felt like breaking. Cooked dinner when I forgot to eat. Whispered, "They're losing. That's why they're loud," when I felt like running. I loved him more in those weeks than I ever had before. Because through the worst storm of my life, he stood in the middle of it and didn't once reach for an umbrella. He just stood with me. And I knew, without a doubt, that I'd chosen the right person to build my future with. A future my family tried to sabotage. But that, like the case itself, wasn't theirs to claim. The lawsuit should have been the lowest point. It wasn't. In fact, it was just the beginning of a new wave of sabotage, a quieter, more insidious kind that didn't involve courtroom transcripts or legal filings, but whispers and lies designed to unravel everything from the inside. It started with a phone call from my cousin, Tess. "Mira," she said carefully, like she wasn't sure how to start. I wanted to check in. I'm really sorry to hear that the wedding is cancelled. The room went still around me. I blinked. What? I said, thinking I'd misheard. I got an email last week, she said. It looked like it was from you. Said the wedding was off because Jordan cheated. I didn't want to pry, but. Are you okay? I stared at my laptop, still open on the couch where I'd been reviewing floral arrangements and guest seating charts. The wedding's not cancelled, I said slowly. And Jordan didn't cheat. In the next hour, I received 3 more calls. All the same story. Emails, text messages, even one printed note, clearly meant to look like it came from me, telling people not to come, that the wedding was a fraud, that I'd been betrayed, and the engagement was off. My inbox had no such messages in its sent folder. Someone had made a fake email account with my name on it. I didn't need to guess long. I called Aunt Louise, my mother's sister, and one of the few people who hadn't turned against me. Louise, I said quietly. Do you know who might be behind these cancellation messages? There was a pause. I was about to call you, she admitted. Mira. Your mom's been telling people you're unstable. That Jordan cheated. That the wedding was all a show. I leaned back into the couch. My body felt leaden. She said what? She's painting you as overdramatic. Vindictive. She's saying you're lying to punish Isla. That you made up the slap, the lawsuit, the whole thing. I covered my face with my hands, trying to breathe. And Isla? I asked. She's telling people Jordan was never faithful. That you're forcing the wedding to go through so you don't look bad. A strange kind of cold settled in my chest. Like the betrayal had frozen over and become something harder. More brittle. Later that night, Jordan walked in from work and saw me still on the couch. One look at my face and he knew something had happened. What is it? He asked. I told him everything. Then, slowly, I added, I think Isla sent you something, too. He paused. Then nodded. He walked to the counter, unlocked his phone, and pulled up an email. She said she had proof, he said grimly. Attached were 5 photos. Sloppy, pixelated, and clearly doctored. My face, poorly photoshopped, pasted onto the body of a woman leaning into a man I didn't recognize. A nightclub setting. A hand on a shoulder. A kiss that wasn't mine. She said you've been cheating for months, Jordan said. That I deserved to know before I married you. I looked at the screen. It was laughable. Like someone's first attempt at editing with a free app and no sense of proportion. But it still made my stomach twist. Not because I feared Jordan would believe it. But because my sister had reached that far into the well of cruelty just to destroy what I had. He tossed the phone on the counter. My parents saw the same photos, he added. And I told them exactly what they were. Fake. Petty. Desperate. He sat beside me. But Mira. We can't pretend anymore. They're not going to stop. We sat in silence. Then, together, we made the call. Security. We hired a private team, 2 trained guards with experience in private events and high-profile interference. They reviewed our wedding venue's layout, installed cameras at the perimeter, and created an access list. They received headshots of Yvonne, Douglas, and Isla. None of them enter this property, I said clearly. Under any circumstance. The wedding day approached like a storm cloud. Beautiful on the surface, but humming with pressure beneath. Our venue was a garden terrace outside the city, surrounded by tall hedges and trellises wrapped in white wisteria. We'd chosen every detail ourselves, nothing extravagant, just simple elegance. Wood chairs. Lanterns. Lavender sachets. I stood in the bridal suite that morning, veil already pinned, lipstick in hand, trying not to let my hands shake. Isabel, my maid of honor and oldest friend, gave me a steady look in the mirror. They won't ruin this, she said softly. But at 2:15, there was a knock on the suite door. One of the guards stepped inside. Miss Dalton, he said carefully. We've just stopped someone trying to enter through the back gate. She matches the photo you provided. My heart jumped. Isla? I asked. He nodded. She claimed she was delivering something, but inside her tote we found a large can of red paint. No brushes. Just the paint. Time stopped. She was going to ruin the dress, I whispered. Or the flowers. Or the aisle. Do you want to press charges? He asked. We can involve the sheriff. I sat down hard on the vanity stool. Everything inside me wanted to scream, cry, lash out, but not today. Not this day. No, I said quietly. Just remove her. Check the perimeter. Make sure my parents haven't tried to sneak in. And don't let her come back. He nodded and left. I sat frozen until Isabel kneeled beside me, gripping my hand. What happened? She asked. I told her. Paint. Sneaking in. Sabotage. Her face turned pale with fury. Mira, she said. You win. Do you see that? They couldn't stop you. So they tried to destroy you. And they failed. You stopped them. I looked at her, tears finally spilling down. And then I laughed. A strange, free, broken laughter, the kind that comes only when you've walked through fire and come out burned, but still standing. You're right, I whispered. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked down that aisle with my uncle by my side, under a sun that somehow still shone. The moment I saw Jordan at the end of the path, I knew. They had lost. And I was free. The wedding was everything we dreamed of, not because it went exactly to plan, but because it happened in spite of everything. Despite the lawsuit. Despite the lies. Despite Isla's attempt to ruin it with a can of paint. Despite the security detail, the tension in my chest as I walked down the aisle, the constant glances over shoulders to make sure no uninvited shadows slipped in, Jordan and I made it. And that moment, standing hand in hand under a blooming arch, promising forever while the spring breeze stirred the hem of my dress, was the purest thing I had ever felt. We didn't just say vows, we survived them. The reception was like a breath held for months finally being released. Laughter spilled from the tables. Glasses clinked. Jordan's best man made a speech that had half the room crying and the other half doubled over laughing. Isabel toasted me with a fierceness that made me sob into my napkin, declaring, "Real family doesn't sabotage your joy. It stands up and protects it." That line stayed with me. When the last guests left, when the fairy lights dimmed and the music faded, Jordan and I sat in the back of our getaway car grinning like teenagers. "You know," I said, head resting on his shoulder, "I didn't think we'd make it here." He turned and kissed my forehead. We didn't just make it. We built it. That night, we drove out of Brambleton and didn't stop until we hit the coast. Our honeymoon was 3 weeks of complete silence, no court updates, no family drama, no whispers about lawsuits or slap videos or missing paint cans. Just the two of us, sunburnt and barefoot, reading novels by the sea and learning to breathe again. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt human again. When we returned, we had one goal: home. We used the rest of the original wedding fund, the fund that had started the war, to place a down payment on a modest apartment on the edge of Brambleton. Nothing grand, nothing flashy. 2 bedrooms, brick walls, a tiny balcony barely big enough for a potted herb garden. But it was ours. Not gifted. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Ours. The first night we slept there, we had no furniture, just a mattress on the floor, and a few lamps borrowed from the office. We didn't care. We ate takeout from the box, sitting cross-legged in the living room while I played music from my phone. The room echoed. It was empty of everything but love. We laughed about it. "This feels like the end of a movie," Jordan said, leaning back on the carpet. "The part where they finally get to just be." I smiled and nodded. "It also feels like the beginning." Building a home became our quiet act of rebellion. Every wall we painted was a step further away from my family's chaos. Every shelf we hung was another memory that belonged only to us. We thrifted half our furniture, built the rest ourselves, and filled every inch of the place with intention. Framed photos from our wedding hung in the hallway. A Polaroid of me laughing in the kitchen. A handwritten recipe from Jordan's grandmother pinned to the fridge. Small things, but real. Sometimes I'd pause in the middle of unpacking a box or folding laundry and think, this is peace. This is what peace actually looks like. There were no phone calls from Yvonne. No apology letters. No messages from Isla. And I didn't expect any. Not after the wedding. Not after everything. But the silence. It hurt, at first. When my birthday rolled around and I didn't get a call, it hit harder than I expected. Even though I'd braced myself, even though I knew better, there was still that small, childlike hope. That maybe, just maybe, my mother would wake up one day and realize what she'd done. But then I remembered. The slap. The lies. The lawsuit. The fake emails. The photoshopped images. The attempt to ruin my wedding day with a can of paint. And the ache softened into understanding. I wasn't missing them. I was mourning the version of them I used to believe in. A few months later, I ran into my cousin Leo at the local farmer's market. He gave me a tight hug and said, "So proud of you. You didn't bend." Then, over coffee, he added casually, "Did you hear? Your parents took out a massive loan for Isla's wedding. Held it at that ridiculous Grand Garden Hotel. Imported chefs. Real string quartet. Whole place looked like a magazine shoot." I blinked. No, I hadn't heard. Leo shook his head. And no one even seemed to care. Half the family didn't show. Everyone's still talking about how they treated you. I smiled faintly. "That's the problem with pretending too hard," I said. "Eventually people see through it." Later that night, I sat with Jordan on the balcony, feet propped on the railing, a mug of tea in hand. The lights of Brambleton glittered below like fireflies. "Do you think they'll ever come around?" he asked quietly. I stared into the distance. "Maybe," I said. "But it won't be enough. Not unless they change. Not unless they own what they did. And I don't think they will." Jordan didn't push. He just nodded and reached for my hand. And in that moment, with the air cool on my skin and our tiny apartment glowing behind us, I knew something for certain. I hadn't lost a family. I had built a better one. Life after the wedding settled into something that felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. Jordan and I didn't rush into anything extravagant. We didn't travel the world or throw lavish parties. We spent our weekends painting the guest room and learning how to make homemade pasta. We argued about where to hang the art we picked together from a local market, then laughed about how passionate we were over a crooked frame. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Real. Peaceful. We were happy. Not the kind of happiness you post about with hashtags and filters. The kind you feel when you wake up and realize your chest doesn't feel heavy anymore. That there's no fire to put out. No explosion looming. And then, of course, came the final ripple from the past. I was at the grocery store when I ran into my cousin Layla. She smiled awkwardly, gave me a quick hug, and looked at me like she was choosing her words carefully. "So, did you get an invite to Isla's wedding?" she asked. I blinked. "No. I assume I'm not on the guest list." Layla hesitated, then said, "Well, it's going to be huge. Your parents took out a private loan. It's at the Grand Garden downtown. Designer everything. They're flying in a chef from France. Her dress was featured in a bridal magazine." I nodded. "Of course they are." Layla bit her lip. "I'm not going," she said quietly. "Neither is Aunt Ruth. Or Uncle Derek. After what they did to you, none of us feel right pretending it didn't happen." That part surprised me. Not because I expected anyone to pick sides, but because I had spent so long believing no one ever would. That people would continue to smile at my mother, clap politely at Isla's ceremonies, and pretend nothing had happened. But they hadn't. Not all of them. Some people remembered. And they were willing to stand on principle, even quietly. It meant more than I could say. The day of Isla's wedding came and went. Photos popped up on social media, carefully curated posts showing her in a beaded gown, standing beneath a massive floral arch, kissing a man whose name I didn't even know. Champagne towers. Gold-rimmed glassware. Perfect smiles. But beneath it all was something else. I heard whispers through the family grapevine, awkward energy at the reception. Gaps at tables where certain relatives had declined the invitation. Quiet conversations about what happened with Mira that no one seemed able to brush off. The sparkle of the event didn't erase the damage. Because damage like that lingers. Because people remember when love turns cruel. And because some truths are louder than flowers and glitter. Back in our home, Jordan and I were thriving, not in flashy ways, but in foundational ones. We used the remainder of my wedding fund, the same fund my family tried to steal, to finish furnishing our apartment. We turned the second bedroom into a small guest space/office, hung string lights on the balcony, and framed a few photos from our honeymoon, wind-blown selfies, quiet sunsets, a pair of sandals forgotten in the sand. It didn't look like much to someone on the outside. But to us, it was the shape of freedom. Holidays came and went. No calls. No cards. My birthday passed quietly. It was the first one without my mother's voice on the other end of the line. For years, no matter how strained our relationship had been, she had always called. But this year, silence. And you know what? It was fine. I made my own cake. Jordan and I had dinner at the small Italian place down the street. My friends sent cards, texted inside jokes, and made me feel seen in ways my family never could. Isabel even showed up with a handmade gift and declared, "This is the birthday where we rewrite the rules." I realized then that family had become a concept I no longer defined by DNA. Family was Jordan, who kissed my forehead when I cried at midnight and reminded me that I was worth protecting. Family was Isabel, who reminded me what loyalty looked like. Family was my cousins who quietly stepped away from the people who had done me harm. Family, I learned, are the people who stay, not the ones who expect you to forgive without change. Months passed. Seasons turned. One night, Jordan and I were sitting on the couch, the quiet hum of a documentary playing in the background. I was folding laundry when he asked, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" I knew what he meant. My parents. Isla. All of them. I folded a towel and placed it on the stack. Then I said, maybe. But not unless they're ready to change. And not unless they can face what they did without excuses. He nodded slowly. And if they don't? I smiled, the first truly peaceful smile I'd felt in a while. Then we're still okay. Because I had stopped waiting for apologies that weren't coming. I had stopped needing validation from people who saw me as a tool for convenience. I had stopped believing that love meant sacrificing myself at the altar of someone else's mistakes. I had chosen something different. I had chosen me. The $45,000 fund my family fought so hard to take. It gave us our wedding. Our home. Our freedom. But more than that, it became a symbol. Not of money. Of boundaries. Of standing up when it's easier to sit down. Of saying, you don't get to rewrite my story. And in the end, the people who tried to take everything from me only ended up proving what I already knew. That real love, the kind worth keeping, isn't conditional. It's earned. It's honest. It's safe. And that's what I finally built.